All right, we are recording. I'm here with Ira, and so Ira, I think you've reached out to me by email a few times, and I think like you were just reminding me. I knew this, but you've done a little bit more interacting with Karen Wong over at the Meaning Code, and then I was just saying that I wanted to do a little bit of a randos because you apparently had some conversation with her that was kind of your rando, but then it wasn't recorded. So we in our emailing back and forth, we had a few ideas that we want to discuss, and I'd like to get into those. So maybe this will just be a teaser for a more full scale rando. But just tell us, I guess, tell me a little bit about yourself, because I think I know a little bit about you, but this will help me more. I need repeats.
Okay, well, there's one thing, and just this came up in your conversation that you posted yesterday with Matt, that it could be a problem in us discussing something, is I have a PhD. Sorry.
Listen, that's all right. I'm not.
You don't want to talk to me, I understand. Let's just cut this right now, because I wouldn't want to talk to me either.
No. I don't think I have a bias against all academics. I would say it's kind of an exception and a rule thing. I mean,
I know more than you do.
That's true. And I tend to speak hyperbolically, I suppose. And so my wife is always telling me, just like, because I'll say things that always seem more extreme than they are.
I can tell you a little vignette about how I think about it.
Okay.
This was in the last 10, 15 years ago. I was working in France, is where I live, and we had a intern who we were gonna fund do a PhD with Massachusetts General Hospital, Harvard, MIT. I mean, the absolute creme de la creme, with a group that has one of the top 10 research groups in the world in terms of number of papers, number of patents, all this kind of stuff. And I was telling her, it's really brilliant young woman. She's German, or fluent in German, French, English, this kind of thing. So, well, you're going to be going though into around the smartest people in the world. It's very impressive, but always remember, they're the ones who have wrecked our country, or the world, really.
Yeah, that's funny.
So that's pretty much the story.
Yeah, our elites are the ones that are ruining.
Yeah. So in France, we have a whole different thing with, there the particular universities are different, but kind of the same thing.
Okay.
So anyway, but my PhD and things are things relatively very, very far away from what you discuss. It's in mechanical engineering with expertise in fluid mechanics.
Okay.
So it's not anything about the nature of knowing. Well, there's a lot of stuff where you get to what you know is true. One of the ways they could really understand it is by doing any kind of experiments, and you just realize how tough it is to know that your data is correct.
Yeah.
Any kind of half-decent experimentalist is just constantly is what you have is true. And I would say the same thing for anybody who's a half-decent people who do models.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of CFD, computational fluid dynamics and other kind of models. And that's always the question. Your model is not totally true. It's only a piece of the reality. There's lots of, and this is where you see where the institutions are failing, is how many of the modelers, a lot of times now they're so young and coming through, they learn how to use the model without ever having to have done the fundamental work about understanding what the models are based on, and take what comes out as truth.
Right.
It's just not. If you develop the models, if you tested them and start to use them and are comparing them to reality, it's like trying to compare them to experiments, validations and things like that, then you see that you're constantly trying to understand which side is true. And that's why any really good modeler and a really good experimentalist likes to work with each other, because you validate both ways.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
uncertain on both ends, and the model helps you take out some of the uncertainty because you can try to. This is all the Vervaeke, all the stuff that's always been around here. There are way too many variables, and they're always getting in the way. And so, how can you understand the effects of variables that you don't know are there, or how much effect they have? So,
Right.
anyway, that's one, I guess, one little rando thing. The other thing, maybe to the discussions that you've been having lately, is now it's 30 something, 40 years ago, I started to developed an interest in economics. I never took a course in it, but I started studying it, and and almost immediately when I started to study it, and maybe some of the people will recognize the name, but it's kind of obscure, but I don't think it should be. But I happen to have a friend who was older, a woman. I mean, she was like in her 70s, and I was in my 20s or something. And for different reasons, became friends with her. And then I mentioned to her, as better apart, we were going to go to lunch, that I was interested in economics. And she had a book there she gave me called Human Action, because she was a good friend of the guy who wrote it. His name is Ludwig von Mises. And he's like the heart of Austrian economics. Not the first or the last of Austrian economics, but he was the guy. And Human Action is just this huge thing. And so I'm still very much, I would say, a devotee of that school of thought or way of thinking about economics, and quite of other things. And he spent a lot of time in Human Action and other books trying to get at this question of what do we know is true? What's the methodology to say anything about the economy? If there's anywhere, like your discussion yesterday, I think, was about how you can say something is true and not true and stuff. Go look at the economics profession. I mean, everything about their statistics. You can say anything you want. And they do. I mean, it's so subjective, it becomes kind of ridiculous. And
I feel like there's some joke about that. You can find a stat to prove anything.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sam. Sam, the statistician, will be
here. Yeah. Well,
maybe not.
Well, that's the thing with Sam, and in medical, there's I spent now the last, especially, well, I'm tired now for a little while, but working on a lot of preclinical experiments and working with clinical data. And again, it's like, how many ways can you get the statistics that you want, or just interpret them the way you want? It's
no, right. And that's like there's so much with that, like the great global event that shall not be named of recent time. I mean, I think that's part of because I've been saying this, is like, in my opinion, we are quite actually, it's not even theoretical, really. I mean, people will debate it, but like, we are post-modernity. We are postmodern now. We have moved beyond it. And I think it's because of what you're talking about, is people have realized, even though this has been in the public consciousness zeitgeist forever, all models are false, some are useful. You can use statistics to prove anything. Trust the science. Which data? Which science?
I wouldn't necessarily say all of them are false, but all of them are incomplete.
I think that's because George Box was the statistician who said that. I think that's what he meant. Like, it's a playful aphorism, It's not that and that's what I mean. I think that's what he means by some are useful. Like, they work.
Well, I can give you
the constraints.
I wouldn't think I would have brought this up, but it really applies when we get to it. Is in fluid mechanics is one of those subjects that's always been really difficult, because we can't really make the complete model. People who know about it will say, "What about the Navier-Stokes equations?" Hold on, if you go through the history of fluid mechanics, which is where it really goes. You want to make a better boat, sailing ship. You want to make an airplane. All these things. And it was only in the 19th century, Navier-Stokes, who thought we had like sort of the full equation. But even there, if you really look into like all the things that could be going on, it's a system of highly nonlinear partial differential equations. I mean, just think of Newton's law. Instead of following like the sun and the moon and the earth, you have an infinite number of potential masses that you're trying to keep track of that are interacting in different ways than just gravity. So you can't deal with that complexity. So has been done over then the 150 to 200 years of kind of mathematical approach to fluid mechanics is one little piece of it, over one little range, you come up with a model. So you might have an interesting one, like flow over a sphere, or especially a cylinder is a little bit easier, sort of 2D, is you start off with what they call Stokes flow, which is very, very slow. And it's really some cool images of what you can look at doing this. And you can write an equation over Stokes flow, at least a limited something about what the drag force is, like of the flow over it. But then as you speed up and you have what's called a separation, or even before that, then you can't use that equation anymore. Then it radically changes, what the drag force will be. And then the flow can become turbulent. And then there's a whole nother set of approximations. You can't do the calculation. You do it. You need empirical data to have any kind of chance of having, predicting things that you want to use on your airplane or whatever else you're doing. And then you can go even into transonic flow, where then things are changing radically again. Then it's a supersonic flow, where you have a whole new model, a whole new set of model where now at the beginning, Stokes flow, you only looked at viscous effects. When you get to the supersonic flow, you throw away totally the viscous effects, because they become less important, and that way we can focus in on something that controls most of the physics and get a reasonable semblance of the reality, but the viscosity is not gone; it's still there. So all these things are going on, and that's what makes it so confusing. Is like, well, which one of these models do you use? You have to, get into the problem and know what you're looking at to be able to get at all these different. And it goes on and on. I mean, as you get into really, really small things, really big things,
Well, and there's so many infinite variables. What that made me think of is, because I don't know if you've heard this about me. My only formal education is outside of high school was I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry. But which I don't know, I said that to somebody else recently and they were like, what? Because that's not most of what I talk about at all. But what I always liked about when chemistry became really interesting to me, and the only reason I did that is because, I don't know, essentially I was told to. I was thinking medicine or something, but
pre-med. Really pre-med, not really chemistry.
Right. Yeah. But in doing pre-med, I did an actual chemistry degree. So it wasn't like a pre-med degree.
No.
And there were people who did like pre-med or something, and they would come in. This is a little aside, and they take like Chem 101, and they're like, "Oh, this is so hard." And I'm like, "This is chemistry 101."
Yeah.
Like, this is not the hard stuff. The stuff that I got to like, the stuff in chemistry that I actually liked was more like the physical chemistry. When you start talking about those dynamics of electron fields and stuff, because like when you were talking about those aspects of fluid dynamics, like that kind of stuff, I went to an engineering school. I went to a STEM school. So a lot of my friends were engineers, and that's the kind of engineering that's actually interesting to me, because the stuff that you're talking about, science, when you get high enough in it and you start talking about the kinds of complexities that you're talking about, you're pointing toward philosophy and like larger meta patterns, that, because everything you were just talking about was, you're essentially saying things are relative. They're contextual depending on the constraints of the speed of the flow. Like that will change the formulations. And so all the models are always changing depending on the context. And what science is doing is trying to limit those things as much as possible, but it can only limit the things that it's aware of. How many factors and variables and dynamics is it not aware of?
Well, this is the big one, I think, in medicine, is where the idea of like a clinical trial as a controlled experiment is so far from the truth. So they're always leaving out tons of variables they're not looking for. And that's why you get any kind of result that you want. And I can you really see this. I was working, with the teams. We did a lot of preclinical studies with gases and things, but on cells. So imagine absolutely genetically the same, as much as you can make a cell the same cell, the same DNA is split up, and you put them one cell culture like in a box and the other cell culture in a box exactly the same, and you give, even among the stuff where it's just sitting there, all in the same box, all the same stuff, you try to measure something and you get all kinds of scatter in it. Now that's in the cells are different, doing things different and biologically really different, or our measuring technique is such that we get those kind of scattered results. But it's all there, and one of the things that you can see when you don't want to trust some data is that you don't know what the error bars are. They're not on the plot you're looking at or the table or whatever. You don't see what the scatter is, and that's supposedly what the statistics takes out of it. And Sam could explain, we take that into account there, and there's all these things that they are, how much you could say they're true, except for those individuals that don't fit. And that was, and one of the big things that used to be said before that C word, is individualized medicine, because how much things were failing. Okay, we can't take the statistical thing, we got to look individually. But then of course when the C thing came along, it's no individuals, everybody had the exact same treatment. The time I remember going in for the V word, which is a whole nother can of worms, but one of the things that bothered, lots of things bothered me, but my 12-year-old daughter weighed about 35, 40 kilograms, would get the same dose as like a rugby player who weighed 150 kilograms.
Right. And anyone in medicine knows
that's crazy.
Dosing is
happen right now. So, I mean, there was so many levels of things. Well, they're not serious because they can't do something like that and say they're serious, So, all that stuff about epistemology essentially is it's always there. Though another thing I was thinking of when you were talking about it, you've done this about the last, I don't know, I think I've seen it 3 or 4 times now, is where you take your red mug. I think you might even have it right now. I don't know what you got in there, right? And you go, how can you really know this thing? And
that's the Vervaeke thing,
Yet you go there and pick it up and take a drink perfectly fine. You do know what it's used for.
Yes.
And you on some level, you really, actually once was years ago, I was teaching at a little school, it was a good school in Texas. And it was nice because they had like a little faculty lounge. It wasn't fancy or anything, but you could go and have a coffee or something and interact with other people. And being a small school, like there was only like 7 engineers on the whole campus, it was mostly all different people. And there was a religion professor, old Texan guy, he had to be in his 60s. And you think, kind of, not so postmodern, but we got into this conversation because I was like teaching something with some of dealing with these postmodern problems. And at that time, it was almost that time was to try to say there are some things that are true versus, because nothing was true, but the postmodernists were really in charge, then to the point where now we're trying to say like nothing could be true because there's always this subjective view,
or maybe how is it true?
Reconcile those things that there's some things really true. And anyway, I remember just coming in and I just asked, look, did you think it was true that the chair that you just went and sat down on would hold you up? And then you see the question kind of got to him for a second, and then he had a really nice Texas draw, no, I don't think I can't do it right. I'm not good at those. But it's like, come on, how can you say, because even the Peterson, you believe what you act, right? So he acted
Yeah.
like he certainly knew the chair was there. You act like you know what the mug is for,
Right.
what it does, what it is, and how to use it. So somewhere in there are, maybe it's something I was trying to reconcile that for myself as I was hearing you say that it's, maybe we can get too deep in philosophy and not just live,
Yeah,
not just
no,
deal with
well,
things.
that's a lot of the things that I say philosophically are that. Like I'll make, but they're pointing to that. This is actually, I might end up having a conversation with McMo, if you're familiar with him, about
I've seen him. He doesn't have his image though, does he? He usually have
no, he has well, it's kind of it's like a playful, cartoony kind of image,
cartoonish thing. Yeah,
his
yeah,
avatar, yeah.
yeah.
But
Avatar.
he's always he talks about Kierkegaard a lot, obviously.
Yeah.
He teased he may start streaming again. But he says that Kierkegaard and I say a lot of similar things. He's just like Kierkegaard just does it better in that sometimes when I'm talking about, I will talk about, to your point, very concrete things like this cup. Like I know this cup,
Yeah.
but I will say it very philosophically, or I'll quote, Rilke, the point is to live everything. Like it's a simple way I would say what you're talking about, sitting in the chair, acting as if that's how you believe. And it's like the point is to live everything. Like truth is embodied.
Yeah, yeah.
If you're not embodying it, you don't, embodiment is truth, is belief.
Well, it's certainly one of the things that I've come to understand a lot better since following, did get, from Peterson downward. Even because I would say I didn't have much respect for psychology before I started listening to Peterson. I mean, I'd been around psychiatry a lot with problems in my family, and I didn't have a very high, I would say not a very high, had a very negative view of psychiatry. But definitely some things that I've learned to understand things better. And so one of them was, another reason I guess I got interested in Peterson and everything else is sort of having a spiritual side. And I became Catholic when I was 35, I think. And at the time, I would say, is like, it was no woo at all. It was, I'd read Chesterton, Aquinas, and Pascal, and different things. But now I really don't think that was it at all. I think I already totally believed things, and that's why I read those. I was much more like just a peasant.
100%.
Like it was just, and probably I even think now, if my world was wider at the time, my understanding of world, I might have considered orthodoxy. It never entered my mind at all. But the sense of what, and all, I think Paul was talking today a lot about this idea of commercialism in choosing your church and everything else. And I had a sense of choosing your church. But to me, at that time, being a very Western-oriented person, then that was just the Catholic Church, and so that was that's what I would do.
Right.
It didn't
I think that's
much of a choice.
That's very true. I think there's I mean, you can point to for you might know the name of these experiments, but you can point to scientific experiments that even point toward this or can validate this on a scientific frame, because what you said, I think, is true. You don't you believe when you act on something and when you do something, you've already made the decision. You already.
I mean, I took the one, from that, and I first saw it with Peterson, the one, the video of doing the psychological experiment with the little basketball ball game and the gorilla runs through.
Yeah.
I mean, I love to make people still watch it. You gave them to get into a political discussion. Watch this, see, now we're seeing different things because of our point of view, and the Dallas Willard worldview lecture that I think Paul talked about a lot and Karen talked about again, I think was excellent for that. And I wrote an article that took on the phrase, seeing is believing, which is a classic empirical statement.
Yes.
To believing is seeing. Not seeing is believing, but believing is seeing. And then quote McGill-Christ and Vervaeke and all these different things that is so obviously true now. And again, as you get into any that you were just, again, I don't know what it'd be like living in Minnesota, but I live outside of Paris. I mean, we have huge manifestations, on a regular basis. There's always, something going on. But and other ways of saying, what's really going on there. I've seen videos of some people talk, oh, that Paris is just a dump, and they show these, and it's true. I mean, you can find a lot of evidence for that. And then, like, get on a boat, like you're going down the Seine or walk, I could give you another 1,000 views that are just spectacular.
Right.
It's unbelievable. They're both true.
Right.
Or even I really like the one, I mentioned this little article, Karen was talking to, I think she recently talked to him again, a guy named Ryan, who was getting into some kind of psychological or therapy, medical practice or something.
Mm-hmm.
But he was describing, I was living in Dallas, and he had been in a depression for even maybe a couple of years or something, and how much he just thought Dallas was the pits. There's like nothing here, and I'm going, yeah, I agree. And then he said he had something with combining this body mind. He aligned himself somehow physically. I'm really butchering his thing, but just the sense he came out of the depression. And he said, look at all the trees there are here. And I have this with my mother was very, very negative,
Yeah.
You should probably say not these days she would be clinically depressed. My wife could be pretty negative. My daughter sometimes, just trying to turn that around, just say, whoa, let's look at the good things. And I think I found in my life, it's actually, I think you write a video, I write an article, and I write. So there's one like about, what may be the best gift to have in your life, in living, is that you concentrate and see the good things. Your worldview is looking for things that are good.
Yes.
As opposed to looking for the things that are bad. I mean, they're there. But it's what you're focusing on.
Yes.
I'm in pain. I got a thing that's there. You just this pain. But you could get out of that. You stop thinking about it.
There's all these, there's all those sayings, we'll talk about the glass is half full, the glass is half empty, or my wife always tells my kids, like, change your perspective and your perspective will change.
Yeah, I had one with my mom because she was pretty amazing as more I think about her over the years. But I would say about her, if you could convince my mom that there was even just a few drops of water in the glass, her response would probably be, "Oh, it's probably poison." The one time I was really pleased with her. She was. This was back in the '90s, sometime where she had grown up in the Depression. It had definitely, and her husband. My father died really, really young, so she had a sense of feeling money pressure, really on her own with 3 kids, and it was something. She didn't have much money, but she had an investment or something. Or I don't know how she was just. She actually didn't have any stock. I don't know why she was so interested in it, but she said, "Yeah, I could kill that dream span for something going on in the stock market." I said, "Mom, this is a great improvement. You want to kill somebody else other than yourself." I'm really feeling you're really progressing.
Yeah, it's the negative aspects. So much of that is so I have two questions I kind of want to ask you, or to think about it related to that. And part of it will seem like philosophical and abstract. Forgive me, because I feel like you're saying, like, we're resonating on a lot of things, and you're just saying it in a much less complex way.
Well, the thing is, I love the philosophy too.
Right.
I mean, and this is the aspect of being a PhD, but I'd much rather talk to people in the bar, about what do you think about something, than getting off too much into it.
Right.
It's often the case, not always, but.
So related to that, this is kind of my question, is because I love the way that I want to frame it and then ask you about it is because I love Terrence Malick. And as far as what I know, Terrence Malick is he makes his films, like I read an article about it once. He was kind of a Heidegger scholar, and he's translated Heidegger, and he studied philosophy, and then he started making film. And the way that he makes film, which is pretty obvious once you watch it, is he's not making films about ideas. He's making films in an attempt to make the way that you perceive reality, because that's the thing, is like, is the glass half full or is it half empty? Yes, it depends on how you look at it. It depends on your perspective. It's kind of like a double slit experiment of, is the glass half full? And so he makes films in that way to try to change people's perspective. And this is then the question related to what we're talking about, is there's one level, and this actually gets into like the way that I talk about things with like mammonistic knowing or Eucharistic knowing, these weird words. And people say, why do you make up words and neologisms and make things complicated? And the reason is because we get familiar with things, and then we just say them as a rote stuff, but we don't understand our own mind control. Because you can tell someone something they're familiar with, like the glass is half full or half empty, and they think they know what that means, but they don't actually know what that means. Because what that actually means is that what you think is real and true in reality is based upon your perception of it.
Yeah.
It's not just like objectively, factually true. That's not true. And I think you have to say things in new ways.
Actually, I think there's
shape people's consciousness.
There is, half full. The one part about that, the way it's said, there is a quantitative part to it, which, in other words, would be better is like, is there plenty of water there, or, how much of it is subjective? When you say, is it half full, you could make, there's a real truth there about just a quantitative measure, which is a whole nother thing, getting down to because I think, again, the quantitative aspect of human condition is one of the worst things that modernity has done.
Right.
I mean, it's just, I could talk about dozens of things.
Because the qualitative, it's like, are you happy about the glass being half full or half empty?
Yeah, or something. Or is there, are you blessed by having this amount of water, or it's like God being terrible to you by giving you this amount of water?
Yeah.
I mean, it's something more of the really profound nature of the question.
Well, and that's the meaning crisis, right? Because like the existential human side of it is like, what care, the world of care, like how does it affect you in your existential being? The glass is half full or half empty. The quantity is going to tell you nothing about that.
Yeah. The actual quantity, how many milliliters or whatever that means. And it's also very subjective to where you are in your life, what are the conditions. And actually, this goes back to the Austrian economics, the big major premise, the title of that economics book is Human Action. It's getting down to human beings and how they do things, from whatever motivation, spiritual, psychological, or whatever it happens to be. But one of the big aspects, huge questions had been going on in economics for, the history of the subject, for over hundreds of years, was where does price come from? How does value come about?
Yes, value.
So,
that's why
Marx,
I like economics.
Marx is the labor theory of value. Look, it took 100 hours to do it.
Yep.
Then it should be given this much value. It took this much capital, this much land, and the Austrian, and it wasn't Van Mises, it was his teacher, I think it was Bovenborg. Anyway, you get those. That's why you start talking like you've been educated. You start naming names. It doesn't make a difference. But it's subjective, and one of the great obvious examples, like with water. How valuable is water? You absolutely need it to live. And if you're in the desert, you pay everything you have for that water. But when it's abundant, it becomes almost have no value.
Yeah.
And again, they go up and down the line of different things in different places. Something you love, you have a Porsche. I love my Porsche. And say, okay, your 10th Porsche, is it going to be as valuable to you as your first Porsche? Whatever it happens to be. So that's
Right.
like the quantitative action of how many of the stuff you have, and that changes your perception of its value. And that's
Yeah.
why exchange, makes sense. Like all free exchanges are something where each side is better. So that's the sense of that Austrian economics, of starting from these premises that are taking as being true because they play out all the time. You see them. Just to me, it's like sort of the way God exists. It's not. I think put it somewhere. It's not that. I started to believe in God to have meaning, but life had meaning, so it had to be God. I mean, it's sort of, it's just there. And the analogy I would come to, for me, maybe other ones, but something I can't empirically really deal with. I can't touch, taste, do something with, is something like gravity. You can't even know what gravity is. Still in physics, is what exactly is gravity? Okay, there's this attraction. How come? And even Newton's law for the 1/r², of the strength of the gravity is it's not based on fundamental understanding. It's empirically a good model, excellent. Like until you get to some super tiny level, anything, whatever.
Yeah.
But anyway, all those things. But if I tried to live without gravity and say I don't believe in it, well, good luck.
Yeah.
It wouldn't last long, and that's the way God is. It's if just act like there's only moral thing is what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Good luck.
Well, and I think kind of like even that, I think it's fundamentally impossible. I mean, I've kind of argued that before. I think like a true nihilist can't
Yeah.
live.
Yeah.
You can't live that way.
It's like I said, a true, totally postmodernist.
Yeah.
Nothing is true. There's nothing you believe in, like your mug or my chair or something else is okay. Again, we can get into the more philosophical about it, but somewhere those things are
Right.
are true, or true in the sense that that's we touch them and use them every day, and some things we can't even touch and do anything with. They're still
Right.
They're true. I mean, that's
Right.
in that sense.
Well, and I don't even know if I'd like to distinguish, and again, the caveat is I'm not really well educated formally in these
Yeah.
topics, but I like to distinguish between what I call the honest postmodernists and the mofo postmodernists, which are and quote my friend Jedediah in the corner, because he said all truth is relative, but it's not arbitrary.
Yeah.
Because that's what we were talking about before with fluid mechanics.
Yeah.
It's relative. It's contextual. It always is, which is what the postmodernists, I think the honest ones were saying. But it's not arbitrary, meaning like it's not completely absurd. Like because truth is embodied, also, it's tethered to a historic reality. But how you know that is always in the moment. Like even, because then this is the problem with modernity, because then we want to analyze even history through analytical discursive reasoning, looking at it abstractly, but you don't even know that way because that's disembodied.
Yeah, you have to know it kind of through some theory. What facts you're going to look at, infinite number of facts, and all the other things, limited knowledge. But I think what you're getting with the mofo versus
honest,
is like the term I've heard of at least one person using a lot that's pretty good is like confession through projection. Like whatever you're accusing somebody of is probably what you're actually doing, kind of a thing, which happens a lot. You listen to some of the different, all kinds of different places, but that's like where the postmodernists, the mofo types, and everything is power. That's why it's the will to power everywhere. Where they're using it to take power. The ones using it, not to question, our data, not to recognize, there's going to be limit, but to say that every time somebody doesn't have your vision of what the truth is, the reason they believe that so they can have more power.
Right. And
Not
even
just
if
from
they're
their
doing it,
perspective, yeah.
yeah,
It's
even
just,
if they're doing it unconsciously with
yeah,
like knights and a mooks thing. But that's
yeah,
like, but even that, like, it's such an annoying statement to me that like when you absolutize power, which is why I love that George MacDonald quote that I've been repeating incessantly now, but like where he says like mere lonely power has no power to create, but
yeah,
love is the power of power.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
there's power for what? Mere power is nothing. Like even within physics, or like power for what? Like what are we talking about? Where's the power directed? And from where? What's its orientation? Like what are we even talking about? Which is
Yeah.
love, which is value, which is telos,
I was
intention.
that's the word I was just about to say. Is I think there it comes to that sense of no telos. Everything falls apart. I mean, there is no meaning. Clearly, it's almost definitionally. Telos is you have a meaning, a purpose in life.
Right.
When
And
you
that's
say no,
why
there is no telos. Like, yeah, you have no meaning.
and that's why it's unlivable, like
circular.
the nihilists. I think
Yeah,
that they'll say, I always think of that line from Good Will Hunting, which I love that movie, but there's a scene where he says when he's first meeting the girl and they get together and they're talking about going on a date, and she's like, well, maybe we could get coffee sometime, after that bar scene. Have you seen the movie?
I have, but I have a really, really, really bad memory. So I
Okay.
know I saw the movie and I know the basic plot, but
Yeah. So he
sometimes I
meets this
don't.
girl in the bar for the first time. He basically, the reason I probably like it is he's just like a blue collar,
Yeah,
no credentialing, but he's like a genius and has read
yeah,
everything. And then he
yeah.
goes
That
to
part
the
I
bar,
remember. Yeah,
and he goes to the bar, and his buddy goes up to this girl to like pick her up, and then some, you know, Harvard student comes over to embarrass him with a bunch
yeah,
of like repeating phrases that he's just repeated out of a book.
yeah,
And then Matt Damon's character comes over and says, he's read all that too and he knows it all. And he's like, do you have any thoughts of your own on this matter? Are you just going to repeat some obscure passage to embarrass my friend, But then with the girl, she comes up to him then after a long time when the bar is closing and says like, maybe we should go get coffee sometime. And he says, or we could just get together and eat a bunch of caramels, because he's just like, if you think about it, it's really as arbitrary as getting coffee. And like, but that's the completely arbitrary relative postmodernism, because I would say, no, it's not.
yeah.
It's
I think
actually
getting
not. The
coffee
reason
there's
coffee
a
is
lot of reasons to get a coffee. Yeah,
like, it's not relative. It's not, and you can't even make it completely relative. That's where nihilism falls apart, where they'll say like, well, nothing matters, and I'm like, you can't live that way, because it's just like, because then you could say like, well, I could go here or there, it doesn't matter, or I could live or die and it would kill myself, but you won't.
yeah. There was this reminds me of another thing I wrote, but Karen got on this thing with physics and the meaning code, and of course I took a lot of physics courses and am interested in physics, but the physicists themselves, a lot of it seemed to me was getting kind of ridiculous. And actually I wrote a thing also comparing like a fantastic story, which is say Genesis and then Jesus coming into the world. It's just, you have to believe it. I mean, you can't give evidence for it. But then if you look at it takes us the Wikipedia description of creation, of the Big Bang, and then some of the forces in there. It's like, you have to take it on faith. And a lot of the stuff like dark matter is that, look, our model doesn't work unless we come up with an idea, like something we can't measure, know nothing about, but it's some huge mass that we can't see, and that'll make our model work.
Yeah.
So that now it exists.
Yeah.
It's really fantastic story, and what you can want to believe. But oh God, now I lost what I really want to say though.
Well, maybe
yeah.
Maybe this will remind you. There's a great Pete Holmes joke where I'm almost inclined to pull it up, but I don't have it queued up, where he's a comedian and he says, essentially, he plays on that idea of the Big Bang and atheism, not believing. And so he says basically like, so what you're saying is there's an infinitely potent nothingness that gives rise to everythingness. And then when we die, we return to the nothingness. He's like, that sounds a lot like God. Essentially,
or something. Yeah.
Because it really is like, I mean, part of even the new atheism, which like we're dying to, people are realizing like it's silly, is they were reacting to a very modernist, simplistic mode of religious belief. But like when you get into the history of religious belief, Vervaeke has talked about this, like non-theism, when you get into the really technical, fathers and great theologians of the church, like there isn't, I mean, they're talking about God philosophically and theologically in ways that like is no less profound than the greatest science that's ever been done. Like, I mean, that's why scientists are starting to go more towards like panpsychism,
or just at least the simplest thing to say is you go through from some of those early church fathers to Augustine and Aquinas, etc. They weren't dumb,
No.
They were as intelligent as anybody, we could have today. And actually, that's what I was thinking of. Was I found an interview when I was thinking about some of these things and read, he has an excellent book where he really has a sense of understanding a lot of philosophical fundamental questions, because he was dealing with at the time the kind of the woke kind of saying like all this physics is just another power play, postmodernist. And blocking his name, this is where my memory just goes crazy. But I think he's the guy who they based like the Sheldon character in that sitcom. What's the sitcom? Where he's
Big Bang Theory.
Yeah. So anyway, he I can't see because this thing. Sometimes my computer does something I don't understand it. Anyway, in this interview, it was something like to the point,
Bill Prady?
No, it wasn't. That was a different one then.
Oh.
Maybe it wasn't that. Anyway, it was to the point of, I think it was something, is there anything, maybe it was, can you love somebody? Does it have any meaning? Because everything was just the wave function. That's the only truth, was the wave function and the interaction between it. And you could see him hesitate for at least a few moments before if I said, no, there's nothing, Now, I don't know if he didn't have any children. I tried to look that up. He had been, was married.
Yeah.
So it's a sense of, again, if you believe the only thing that there is a wave function, and what do you do with your day? Why are you studying physics? That's the point.
Right. And back to what we were talking about earlier, if belief really is in the chair, like what you act out, he doesn't believe reality is just a wave function. Because like we said, it's unlivable.
Yeah.
He actually can't live that way.
Now he he didn't seem to have any care about his students. If they can't really help my research, I'm not so interested in them. In other words, those things like at the limits, you can't, but some people act.
Oh, it will affect.
Yeah, in ways that are pretty
will
nasty.
Influence you.
Yeah,
and that's I suppose that's a good illustration of how I think that's a perfect illustration of how I perceive ideas, because in a lot of our discussions in the corner, I'm the big anti-propositionalism person, but it's not as if I don't think that's part of the equation, because that's exactly it. Like that person doesn't actually believe everything is a wave function. That's what I'm trying to say with ideas. He just thinks he believes it. However, him thinking that he believes it does plant seeds that influence the way that he lives in reality. And by God's grace, it doesn't completely overtake the way that he lives, or else because you have to have love and value to operate in the world. But if that belief reaches its fullness, then he ceases to be. Quite literally.
I mean, there is the other sense, and this is the thing, the tension between almost anything you think about. There was a famous book, I think it was in the 50s, pretty sure, a conservative thinker, I think it was Wilmore Kendall, I don't know, was it Kendall or Richard Reed? My memory is not good, but it's the title of this book was Ideas Have Consequences.
Yeah, yep.
And that's that sense of where education goes. But again, even education, I don't know how much, as much as you think people seem to be get indoctrinated. That was another term that came up recently in some of the discussions. If there is doctrine, you're trying to get it into people. I guess that's what you're trying to do. It's then why, what is it that is the doctrine that's going on? But then so many people seem to go through it, can be slough it off, while others never seem to get over it. I mean, that's this complexity of life that's just so difficult to.
When you say
all the
slough
different pieces.
it off, do you mean doctrine?
Yeah. In other words, you think, well, these people are all going to think this way. They go through the school, and then, a few years later, like women who maybe becomes a hardcore feminist, like a Mary Harrington, And then she has a baby and falls in love, has a baby, and her world like flips around and go, well, maybe that wasn't the, what I was.
Yeah, everything you thought you knew shifted and changed.
Yeah,
like
I think that's one of the, certainly, I'm sure somebody said this, but it was, for me, for fluid mechanics, for one thing, is like each time I kept learning how much I didn't know. I had 2 classes in it. I really know this stuff, and then I get into the deep study, and it's okay. I don't know all the details. So there's that kind of propositional knowing where you can keep going deeper and deeper. And then the other side was, say, this thing about understanding religion, and I'm not at all a Bible scholar type. I can't reel off the different chapters and verses of things. But just I just looking back over my life, it's like most of all the big decisions I always made were intuitive. Like, why did you do that? You have 5 job offers. Why'd you take the lowest pay? Somewhere you didn't know anybody. I don't know.
Yeah.
It turned out great, but I don't know why, I can't, there was something about this. I mean,
there's that great French phrase, the certain je ne sais quoi.
Je ne sais quoi, yeah.
Well, yeah, forgive my poor French. This is like, I wish.
Don't forget my poor French, and I got to live with it every day.
Well, I'm sure you have better French than I do living there. That's something, another guy from the corner, but Lucas Voss.
Yeah, no, I wanted to get, I've been thinking about trying to make it to an estuary thing for a long time. And like in France, nobody's heard of Jordan Peterson. And he's a non-entity. I don't know if anybody's heard of Ian McGilchrist. I mean, it's a different intellectual world.
Yeah. How did you?
Well, this is from more libertarian side. And it's kind of interesting. There was a guy, he named himself the Bionic Mosquito, and
I know that name.
He's written some things in the comments to Paul's, not lately, I think, but over time. And somewhere in his thing, which at the time was very libertarian.
Yep.
He mentioned this guy Jordan Peterson, who I'd never heard of, was doing a biblical lecture.
And
then I went and started listening to biblical lectures, and I wrote about that. But to me, the big thing was an academic, in a non theological field or something, like just treating the Bible in a serious way, and also a pretty interesting way. There was a lot of things about it. So then somewhere like the YouTube feed in those days, whatever, then Paul's thing came up. I think the very first one he did. So I've been around since that whole time. And it's interesting, the Bionic Mosquito guy, he now only does like Christian stuff. He has like no more libertarian stuff. He has like a daily thing about his Christian journey. He's done a ton of stuff about the early church councils and all that kind of stuff that I've been following, which is interesting compared to, not that they're comparable in the way they've approached things exactly, but with Sam and his ability to have complete propositional knowledge, of the material,
Yeah, there's that's funny and that's interesting. 2 thoughts that I had, which is, one is the Jordan Peterson, you came for the politics, stayed for the religion, because it's that, like, you start off libertarian.
No, I came for the religion.
No, well, not you. I'm
For
saying like
me, it was
bionic.
absolutely for the religion. It wasn't.
me, it always
I've
was.
always found this politics has been really bad. It's
No,
not
right.
good
But
at
like
the
someone like
politics.
Bionic Mosquito, who they maybe start off libertarian and then they maybe realize, oh, when they get deeper in that, they realize like, oh,
Yeah,
everything that I love about this is actually
yeah. Well, he
religion.
was. I think there's some of it there, but he was going toward the religion part. I mean, he pointed to Peterson because it was religion. This was the Bible series,
Okay.
which really didn't have politics. And I think there's interesting things about, and I think there's one of the topics we maybe didn't going to talk about, didn't get to, is where that libertarian Christian come together. Because here in France, for
Yeah.
example, libertarian, if anybody even knows the term, it's essentially libertinism.
Mm.
Not some necessarily the political
Which is so
side of it.
interesting because I feel like so much of that libertarianism came out of like France, Thomas
It did.
Jefferson.
Well, especially there's some really good in my, I was, for me, France was not such a special place. I was much more of an Anglophile, or even I love Spain. I wasn't planning to come to live in France, and that's another story. How that came about, and but a lot of my understanding of those things has changed. I mean, we think of France today so much as they're socialists, these philosophical da 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 da, but historically there's a lot more there. And in terms of, for example, the French Revolution is taken as this, wiping out everything. They killed the king, they're against the church. But there was an English Civil War where they executed the king, wiped out, desecrated churches like crazy. The iconoclasm was, crazy. And so I don't know, I have a different view of France, with that historical sense. And obviously I'm embedded in it now, so I have a different view. But what was I going to say, though? We were going somewhere, and then I forgot what it was. Anyway, libertarianism. Yeah, so that's the sense of in this. I was at a party along the Canal Saint-Martin. You ever been to Paris?
No, I haven't. Because I'm kind of a Francophile. I love a lot of French that never been. So
well, now you know somebody there who can hook you up. In a lot of different places around here. My married to a French woman. That's so it's
there you go. It's a great connection.
Except she's a journalist, which causes a lot of friction.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Talk about like what is true.
Yeah.
You can't trust this. You can't trust the news. He says, my friends, you can't want them that way.
Yeah.
Half of our friends are journalists. It's in French TV. So you see them all the time.
So you were talking about the canal.
Yeah. So anyway, there was like the philosophy teacher was having this party, and she's like the social housing on the Canal Saint-Martin. This beautiful apartment. This is social housing.
Yeah.
They have a lot of crazy things. Just make no sense to an American sensibility, sense of understanding things. But it's really like, how could you be a libertarian and a Christian? And I don't know. My wife must have talked to her about it. And to me, there was a sense of my off-the-cuff answer, which is, and I thought about more. I think this still is true. Historically, just the sense of from Jesus on historically is the value of every individual person comes. I mean, there's no more slave or king or whatever in the eyes of God. Have a sense of worth.
Yeah.
And then in the libertarian side, that's also the individual takes on this prime importance. They make the choice
of
as a
one
consumer.
has infinite quality.
Yeah. Now the other side, I think, where I criticize modern libertarianism, or some of the libertarian theorists, a lot of them coming more from Ayn Rand or something else, is some of the objectivism. It's not really libertarianism, but is always getting down to the individual, like the individual versus the state.
Yeah.
And not throwing away all the other layers in between. So family, church, business. I mean, there's so many levels and complexity, and every time you take away those levels, dealing with there's nothing a Leviathan state would like more than it was the individual versus the state. It's the power difference that ever makes it. But if you have churches against the state, or even big companies, not the way they go now, they control the state, seemingly. But you need those other institutions, and that's where the Catholic subsidiary comes in.
Right. Yeah. Because theoretically, if you can make God AI and isolate everyone in their own little pods, they have.
Well, there's some of the libertarians talk a lot about. Jeremy Bentham was the classic utilitarian guy. It's funny because he's at is it LSE or UCL in London, but they've made him like his body. I don't know if it's real now, but like his body that they mummified is like sitting in a glass case.
Really?
I think it looked at Jeremy Bentham's body or something. I've seen it, kind of a thing.
Weird.
Anyway, he had an idea, like, for the perfect prison was the panopticon. Am I just pronouncing it properly? Panopticon.
Panopticon, yeah.
And the idea is that, in the prison, this institutional building, he said, is that, all right, now I've lost you in all my little clicks. Let's see right there. Is the, it's like, imagine like a round building, and in the center is the tower where the watcher is, and everybody else is in their own little cell. Right. All they can see. And that's the world. The technology is there to create the panopticon, where they know everything you do, and you're only seeing what they show you.
Yeah. It also is a lot like Lord of the Rings and the one eye to see and rule all the things. Yeah. Well, that's maybe.
Because I think we're getting kind of long in the.
No, this is. Well, because I started late and everything else, but this has been fantastic. We covered a lot of ground. Maybe if we have future conversations, we could do more of the libertarian stuff, because we had talked about talking about the native peoples too.
That's what I wanted to, because you talked about, in other words, what I was going to propose to you was a particular book where the author is a friend of mine, but it's relevant. But it talks about a dam project in Alberta. And he investigated this dam project and has these different points of view. Like how did the Indians see it? How did the people building the dam, the government people? And he does a fantastic job of presenting the points of view. I don't think he has a very good sense of synthesizing it at the end, because he's such a nice guy. He takes everybody face value. It's really, really interesting. For me anyway, but then you can see you say, well, they signed a treaty, and then you see the law says this, and then you say, well, what about that treaty signing? It says, well, they basically took them at gunpoint and said, go to this meeting and sign this treaty, and then they signed it. That was happened 100 years before or something. So there's all kinds of things there that, because it came up in your conversation specifically, somebody's talking about Indian, Native American things. I have perfect example for that particular conversation. That's why I was trying to jump in at that time, and it didn't work out. So anything. Now I'm retired. Kind of hang out, and especially in the middle of the afternoon. And that's like, I have my long nap in the afternoon.
That's right.
Yes,
you're Frenchish. You gotta.
That's definitely me. I don't sleep at night, and then I take it after.
Europeans know how to do that. That really is one of the things I most love about European culture, or even Spain, because I've been to Spain like Italy or something. It's just like, take an afternoon nap and then stay out having long dinners with people until midnight. It's fantastic.
I don't know if that makes you make it to midnight either. It's just I don't sleep, like wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning all the time.
Oh man, I'm a very early to bed, early to rise. Remind me, just tell me, and in case for the recording, the name of your friend's book.
I'd have to, let me see if I can.
You had emailed it to me, but I forgot about it.
Yeah, it's called Who Speaks for the River? The Oldman River Dam and the Search for Justice. and his name is Robert Girvan, Girvan, and he was a former Crown prosecutor, and so he comes from that sense that the law is absolutely a good thing, and they're honest people, and it's Canadian. I mean, before Canadian went super crazy,
right.
And he's a super nice guy, and he's trying to tell he's from that part of the country. His wife and my wife were friends from middle school, so that's how I know him. So I read his book because it's a friend's book, but it struck me, several passages I can read to you that just, oh wow, yeah, that's where the sense of truth and whose perspective and all these things just are right there in a hard example.
It's there, once you see the way broadly, you see it in everything. So let's if we can get another conversation scheduled.
Yeah, just whenever you have inkling, I'm lurking. That's my.
Well, I mean, you're somewhat out of the lurk now. What I think is so, I suppose I want you to have the last word, but the last thing that I will say is, I'm excited. I'm excited that this is a new evolution in my thing, is that I'm just like, instead of just live streaming all the time, I can have these semi-private conversations that then, because the live stream is a different dynamic that then we put out separately, because this is its own body. This is its own container that has different dynamics, and the medium is the message. This medium is going to create different dynamics, which is interesting and fun. And then I can talk to other people because, there's someone like you, or something I've realized with a lot of my friends in the TLC, and like even Matt C or PBK have been saying they're realizing about me is somewhat, this is for lack of a better word, this is somewhat of a ministry for me. Like I'm something that I'm very passionate about is the thing that we say in the TLC is bringing people out of the lurk, because I think that all the time. I meet someone like you, I meet someone like Neil, all these different people, McMo, Matt C, all these different people used to be like they were hidden. They were either in the comments or not even written. They hadn't written anything. Like they weren't salient and visible to me at all. And then all of a sudden they come out and they're rings within rings of depths that you can go with these people. And I'm like, people are amazing. Like I really, really love people. And so when someone interesting and fun and has all these stories comes out of the lurk, I feel like my cup overflows. I feel like more of a full person.
Well, I think the first comment I made to one of your videos was about my sense of the TLC is more like a really good pub, because that's my experience in life. Now, like you were going to church real young and everything else. That's not my experience at all. Even though I've been going to church for years, for decades, I would say only became like a member of a parish in the last 3 or 4 years since I retired. I mean, I've always been to church. I mean, every week or more. I go all the time. But now I'm sort of more like a member in meeting people and doing things. Where that I have the feeling that you described, that sense of connecting with people, because generally in modern society, American society, you don't connect with anybody. I mean, you get in your car,
less all the time.
Less and all the time. But where could you just talking to somebody, and that's where when you have a really good pub, what makes it a good pub, one of the things is you're in there, and then the next thing then you do know a bunch of people. And what's interesting, what's really nice is it's like a sitcom where there's like a guest person comes in each week. Like somebody's going to pop in you've never met before.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, there's like a new person. Wow, that's a different.
Who walked into the bar? Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe they're
to my friends.
Maybe they'll be gone. And I've had because I've lived in different places. I've had great pubs like that, experiences like over decades, and kind of almost all over the world. In Europe and down in Texas and Tennessee and North Carolina and all these places, Pennsylvania, and that's like the richness that you're talking about. That there's the drinking part of it that can be more or less, and obviously can get to be a problem, and also is a positive thing. I mean, the sense of to get somebody to actually talk about something in an honest, serious way. there's a beer curve. This is like in grad school. We do like, when is the birth? Well, we talk about shooting guards, but it's like how many beers before the real person arrives, or some facsimile. Anyway, I'm gonna let you go. You got kids to take care of. I got to see what's going on here. And
thanks.
I'm around, and it's another nice thing to. I don't have actually a pub now. I have church, but I don't have a pub.
Right. I don't think most people do, which is why they keep playing at the TLC, or they don't have. The reason people are here is because it's fulfilling something, or else they wouldn't be here.
Yeah, though I can say it's like, I don't think I ever became an alcoholic, but I'm becoming a podcast-aholic. I shouldn't watch that many.
Yeah, it can be a lot.
I do watch usually double speed.
Yeah, it helps. That's about all I do is I watch TLC stuff. There's a few other things that I watch, but that's about it. And I like the audio because I do it when I'm doing other stuff.
Yeah, I gotta get somewhere to do something like that. There's also so many others. I mean, I think you were getting at this, like, to know the world. Or Matt said it. If you're watching CNN or Fox News and think, well, that's the world. I watch both. And the good pod. There's a really good guy on. He's funny because he has an avatar where he's a green chicken, and he's called Doombird, and he's an expert on energy issues, energy geopolitics, and his thing is he says, like, he reads newspapers or the journalism from 8 different countries, because otherwise you don't know what's going on. And then there's a one on geopolitics called the Duran, where they'll give you like what the Russian Foreign Service puts out versus the American one, like the readout. It's just that sense of like their own views come through, but they're giving you this comparative sense that would take hours, to try to distill. And if they're honest brokers at it, you get more out of it at the end. Anyway,
right. All right, buddy.
Last word.
Perfect.
Cheers.
Thank you. Until next time. All right. We'll talk to you later.